Hi, Punit. It's great to connect with you. Thanks for taking the time to, connect with me and, spend some time to just talk about Skye and just know what you're doing in terms of just you being the CEO and making things happen for the company.
Hey, thanks, Danny. Thanks for dragging me out on a Sunday. You interrupted my run for this. I'm just kidding. It's great. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Skye, and I know you've been following the story very closely.
The goal of this interview is really just to share to the audience more information around Skye, right? What Skye is working on, to learn more about the SBI 100, what the company is working on, the culture. So this video is not intended for any investment advice or anything like that. There's no actual affiliation. So it's really just to share information and just to learn more about what the company is working on. So, Punit, if you wanted to add to that, please go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate you following Skye and your support of Skye as a shareholder. I'd like to, I guess, reaffirm that we have no affiliation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and to discuss Skye. It's really a pleasure, actually, from what I've been able to view on your channel. It's really nice to see how you've been following Skye, and you've been recognizing the milestones, and you understand the business plan, and you've been following really closely. I also think it's commendable for shareholders like yourself to really take the time to understand the company. We now have over 50,000 shareholders, I believe, from the last meetings that we've had. And one of our jobs as a company is to ensure our investors and our shareholders recognize the specifics of the business plan and the investment proposition of Skye. So some of these investors and shareholders, just recently become investors or shareholders in the company through the acquisition we made, and some have been, I think it looks like, just based on the achievement of recent milestones. So we understand there's many different dynamics for people to be attracted to this type of story, and we want to remind listeners also to review the risk factors in our SEC filings, and that's available on the SEC website under Skye Bioscience. Again, yeah, this is not a paid promotion, and this is an interview not intended, to be any investment advice on Skye.
Thank you, Punit, for highlighting that. So as we transition to learn more about just overall with what Skye is working on, if you can just provide an introduction at a high level with what Skye is doing right now. I mean, what is Skye working on?
Wow, that's yeah. So we've been obviously that's been a lot, right? So right now there's the macro level where we frame it as unlocking the pharmaceutical potential of cannabinoids. Clearly, that's been very focused on ocular diseases, and that's what we've been talking about. So SBI 100 OE, ophthalmic emulsion, has been one of the things that has been really the key opportunity we've been progressing. That's the lead asset. So been following the company, we've gone from early research data now to clinical trial in 24 months, and glaucoma that opportunity has turned into a multi-phase clinical development strategy. So there's been quite a bit of effort in terms of that area. In terms of general remarks about why are we in this, what's driving that interest. We've been paying attention to some other market examples of similar commercial success. Aerie Pharmaceuticals is an example of a company which was acquired by Alcon in late 2022 for $930 million, I think, was the total consideration. Why I highlight them is that they were the company that had the last two drugs approved in glaucoma, which was Rocklatan and Repressa. And then, of course, there's been GW Pharma that was acquired by Jazz for multi-billions, and that's another example of a cannabinoid going through that clinical path. So same thing on Skye. We've been just focused on that progress. We've before even making some of these bold kind of investments that we've been making in the clinical side, we completed an overall market assessment, looking at the opportunity of how SBI 100 is applicable, how it's going to fall into the overall landscape. It's the ever evolving landscape in terms of what's being used right now and what's the treatment approach in glaucoma. What made that look like in 3 years, 4 years, and so we've been also developing that commercial package in parallel, and that's that product profile and the potential labeling, in addition to the parallel activities on the clinical development. So I think we're obviously really happy about the recent milestones, and it's been full kind of pedal to the metal of advancing that. Speed is the measurement in clinical in life sciences. So we've been putting together all the pieces that we require for eventual commercial success, and right now those steps have been recently now focused on drug manufacturing scale up, and phase two and beyond, as well as the clinical progress. So we're enrolling in our phase one, but in soon we'll be enrolling in our phase two, and that's now months away. And then within the next 12 to 15 month window, you're finally gonna have clinical data, right? So up until 2022, we've been just talking about animal data in this class. So for ocular diseases. So this is the first time now an eye drop of this compound is now being utilized in patients. So that's, I think, quite an exciting moment for the company, exciting moment for the overall landscape, and we're just continuing to push ahead, and I'm really excited about that.
Right. So I'm very thankful for you highlighting, Skye being one of the leading pioneers, especially with the active ingredient that you've formulated with bioengineering that product. Now, Punit, if you can just, I know we can talk about the science in detail, but if you, at a high level, if you can share how that eye drop works for a patient with like a ocular disease like glaucoma, how does it work?
Yeah, so there's been kind of multi-steps here, right? SBI 100 is a THC prodrug. What we've done is taken a synthetically derived THC, modified it into a prodrug, and then we've now taken that and added the other components to make it a nano emulsion and into an eye drop. So there's additional, call it, ingredients added that are unique, as well as the process in terms of how we manufacture it, that takes the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and all the way through to an eye drop. So we have IP along the composition of matter around the actual THC and the modification of that into a prodrug, and now all the way to eye drop, and we'll continue to evolve our intellectual property as we understand the dosing and other things that we're doing specifically in glaucoma. But it's kind of a fork in the road, because eye drop, that's why we have this OE designation. It's just one delivery of SBI 100. Naturally, you can deliver SBI 100 in other ways. It would be oral or IV, or the company has explored other routes like suppository. So different diseases are going to require different applications. So we are looking at an eye drop format for ocular diseases, and historically the company actually has spent research, a fair amount of research, and has data on the other applications of the technology, and we'll continue to look at ways that we can monetize that. But the company at the moment, under my leadership, has been really focused on as an ophthalmology company.
Thanks, Punit. Now, just to further understand about Skye's mission, purpose, can you walk me through more about just what the purpose is and what the team is working on?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's a lot of people categorically kind of put that into the soft side of what we're doing, but it's really relevant here. Thanks for kind of touching on that. It's look, the team is committed to making an impact on people's quality of life. That's transforming this idea of novel compounds into the right opportunities for ocular diseases. So clearly, we've set a really clear example for how that works in glaucoma. If you can have that desired lowering of intraocular pressure or that disease modification by targeting CB1, that's a clear action and reaction associated with that target. So there's other opportunities, and that's what we're committed to as an organization. The motivation side of life sciences is, I think, the easy part, because a lot of us are focused on making a difference for patients, getting it done with the right people, the strategies, the process, the building of the enterprise, and then the most important, capital to actually achieve all that is the hard part. And as you probably noticed, we're a team that's really devoted towards getting it done. We are very much more on show it with action, instead of just talking about it. We're operating in that manner. I've always been very transparent about having that conversation about making sure people understand what that process looks like. Part of the importance of people like yourself that are taking the time to understand the business. It's been highly encouraged, and our IR team has always kind of bumped me over the head over this. Is like, okay, it's important to kind of lay out the breadcrumbs, if you will, for everyone to follow what happens in the life science industry. Not everyone kind of understands all of the details of what goes on into building pharmaceutical products. Some of us have been in the industry now for over 2 decades. We've worked on many different drugs. This is things that we do day in and day out, but not everyone kind of gets a look in. So we're really, obviously a company that's interested in, transparency and integrity and operating that way. But that is also the what drives us there is being enabled to make some of the bold investments into the space. So we recognize that there's twofold thing: is us focusing on the speed and execution side, but there's the investment that's required by the industry to recognize this class of compounds. So we're making that investment. This company, has spent a fair amount of dollars now on advancing the lead asset, but we've also spent a fair amount of capital on the broader development pipeline, some of the R&D work that we're doing. So we have a diverse portfolio now of molecules that have the potential to protect and restore vision. And I've stated this before, and I'm going to repeat it, is that our focus is on the development of products that are really revolutionary. They're not just meant to be, this incremental or evolutionary thing that is important. If we're trying to make an impact here with what these drugs can offer in terms of differentiation. And my experience comes from cancer immunotherapy. So I haven't developed an ophthalmology drug. Thankfully, we have a really great team around us that has developed ophthalmology drugs, such as our board members and people on our clinical team and all the different advisors that we're working with. But I'll tell you, from my experience, I've seen these different disease segments and how they've transformed, right? So in cancer immunotherapy, when I started my last company in 2011, there was one new drug approved by Bristol, which was Yervoy. It was the same month that I started the company, and the same month you had this next generation immunotherapy. It took a melanoma response rates up by a few percentages compared to chemotherapy. But over the whole decade, you had then that same class of compounds, molecule checkpoint, what they're referred to as checkpoint inhibitors, now being the dominant approach for treating cancer. So Keytruda basically helped Merck establish itself into the superpower in oncology, and Bristol same way. And now you see these cell therapies and CAR T approaches and stuff like that. So I think that our experience here is twofold. On the commercial side, having done deals with multiple different pharma over my life in life sciences, it does give you a glimpse into kind of where the trends are heading and where the IP is changing. And in ophthalmology, there hasn't been any real rapid innovation. And if you look at glaucoma as a specific case, and this is all in our presentation, that the same drugs have been used over the last few decades, and the iteration of those drugs is just modifications. And there's been nobody focusing on new targets that also are applicable for disease modification. So that's the opportunity here, is like we've identified the endocannabinoid system as potentially an avenue where you can modulate that different diseases. In glaucoma, targeting CB1 happens to be a great target that is found in where 90% of the drainage occurs in the trabecular meshwork for this aqueous humor. If you can have the desired effects of anti-inflammation and anti-fibrosis, and trabecular meshwork allows that drainage to occur, great. I mean, that's a different target than any of the other diseases are focusing on. So we're looking at that kind of approach, and for us to invest in screening platform and all of the 80 plus molecules in development, or sorry, not in development, but 80 plus molecules identified to go after specific front of the eye and back of the eye diseases that are looking at specific targets, just like CB1 or TRPV1 or other important cannabinoid and non-cannabinoid. Okay, so I don't think it has to be just cannabinoids. I think the opportunity is quite vast. So it's our vision. You asked about vision, purpose. Our vision is grounded on this whole aspect of ECS modulation, and we think that that's definitely the research and investment into that is going to continue to be important over the next decade. And we have a leadership position in the ophthalmology space. That's how we've been building Skye. We're going to continue doing that to put ourselves at the forefront and now dominate the space. In less than 2 years, we've come from being behind everybody else to in front of everybody else. You look at the landscape. Anybody else that was working on the cannabinoid ophthalmology space, said the same things that we said, whatever, when I started at Skye as CEO, and I'm really proud of what the team has accomplished, and we're going to continue to dominate that field, and then we have the IP to back it.
All right, so it sounds like you really drove a concept into action. Now, just to highlight, Punit, I appreciate you just sharing the overall details around the purpose and mission around Skye. When it comes to just you being the CEO, I believe you became CEO of Skye since 2020. Was it August timeframe?
Yeah. I was formally on the board. I was acting as chair, and then took over formally as CEO in August, early August.
Now, since you become CEO, Punit, let's say if you were to look at where Skye is today in terms of culture compared to where it was when you became CEO, what has changed? How has that changed over the course of the years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, a company's a new company. Every single person at the company is is new, right? So I was employee 1 in August 20. We had a few changes right there in terms of CEO transition and chief medical officer transition and so forth. So with that behind and the company, then the company had to rebuild. So our team has been rebuilt from the ground up. Then you have a completely independent and experienced board that's brand new for the company. And by experience, I mean they've developed ophthalmology drugs. Dr. Praveen Tile and Dr. Keith Ward, former Bausch & Lomb executives. I think Praveen was chief scientific officer of Bausch & Lomb and Novartis. So you have like really experienced people on advancing ocular diseases, and then same thing we've done on the clinical advisory board and the scientific advisory board. So in my perspective, the team has been the most important kind of shift, right? You have a team that's motivated, experienced, focused on building, focused on competing, focused on getting the job done. And I think that's been one of the most important. But fundamentally, then you also have the clinical development progress and the pipeline side. So the glaucoma program it has advancing that has been a major step for Skye. And now, we've shown the switch has gone to being a clinical company. So we're going to continue to build on that and continue to unpack what we're already committed to doing. The other side of it has been the pipeline. So not only are we focusing on advancing our lead compound, which is where 90% of our efforts are going, but we have a dedicated effort on developing a pipeline of other targets and other drug candidates that make sense to follow our lead compound. And I think the biggest other shift has been intellectual property. So IP, is from a commercial setting in life sciences, it's what not to oversimplify it, but there is a currency that's used as a currency to create value in life sciences. That's what we would ultimately, utilize to establish a commercial path with a partner. And I've stated this before. We're interested in commercializing, but we're interested in commercializing with the people that have the experience and the call points to get the drug into the access points that it's required. So to do that, you have to use intellectual property to carve your moat, if you will, to have commercial success. And historically, the company was founded on licensed IP from University of Mississippi. In the last 2 years, we've shown that we're not only dependent on University of Mississippi, we've built an additional IP portfolio. So we have several IP families now. We have SBI 100, we have SBI 200, we have all of the stuff that's happened in our own homegrown portfolio. So I think that gives us a lot of new flexibility and choices. And when you look at it from a shareholder perspective, that's important because we're not having to give up economics. When you're having to do sub-licensing revenue of in-licensed IP versus homegrown IP. So every single one of those is important. The team is devoted towards creating value for stakeholders because they're committed to getting it done. You have the clinical inflection points and the pipeline that's focused on developing products that make sense in a commercial, rational way that is going to create value for shareholders. And then intellectual property, using that currency metaphor, you're creating the economic moat that's required for making sure that we actually can command the licensing dollars and the bio dollars that we would expect. So you look at these examples like Aerie and the Alcon deal. It's quite impressive because I think that Aerie had its own challenges from commercialization of these two drugs, and they didn't have they weren't billion-dollar blockbuster drugs, but they navigated their own commercial path and they had a substantial amount of sales that gave them, it looks like, at least 3 to 4x multiple on annualized sales on their products. So $930 million in total consideration was a good return on invested capital for investors. So same thing, I look at that in terms of, look, my team's devoted on keeping the burn rate lean and giving a return on invested capital. To date, the company spent about $56 million in accumulated deficit, which thankfully is relatively low for a company that's been around since 2014. Our team has been part of that is, I think, 26 to 28 million, I believe, in terms of cash spend. And I do expect that there's going to be probably, a certain amount of capital, at least same amount or a little bit less of capital required for us to get that exit that we're looking at on the lead program. So from a rational perspective, if we spend, let's say, 15 million this year in OpEx, or 13 to 15 in OpEx this year, and 13 to 15 in OpEx in 2024, we want to have enough also in our bank account so that our back is not up against the wall when we're negotiating with a potential partner. So all in all, I mean, that you're talking about 45 million maybe in addition to what we've already spent. That's $100 million if you take all those numbers. yeah, we're looking at, in just pure dollars, we want to see 7-8x, multiples on that, in terms of from that stage of development. But in investment, stock price and all those things, I mean, who knows? That's could be a 30-40x in terms of ROI, right? So there's a long way to go, but there's a commitment here in terms of the fundamentals here on team, clinical development, IP, that all work together to increase that value.
Yes, I know you talked about, just with the inflection points, and it's great that you shared the area example, and just looking at how other companies had succeeded, from the starting points and with data being presented. Now, I'm just curious, like, what would success look like? Because based on the information that I've been learning, based on the press releases, Skye is in phase 1 clinical trials at an international site in Australia, and there's a plan to initiate US clinical trials, phase 2, at one point in the first half of the year. So it's really like a two-pronged approach where you're gathering data from multiple sites. Now, when we think about just what success would look like, what do you entail, like, with what success would look like?
Yeah. Look, ideally it's like blow everybody out of the water in terms of IOP, and that's, and everyone's going to be really happy. But I think it's never that easy. So we're look, thankfully you have a molecule that we're advancing that has an existing clinical data set. There's a slide in our deck that we put there, and it showed that in the 70s, you had cannabis and these studies that were sponsored by the US government and NIH, and the US Army, that showed like these large studies, 100 patients, 120 patients that smoked cannabis, and you had reduction of IOP of over 30%. That's phenomenal data, right? Unfortunately, then you have regulations kind of kick in with Nixon and then Reagan, where it was there was that whole campaign of say no to drugs, and I think research really got thwarted. It's like directly correlated. There's basically a gap in the 80s and 90s in terms of research. So I believe the historical context of understanding that THC can reduce glaucoma is great. That's great evidence. Nobody has taken it to making it into an eye drop, into a prodrug that gets into the right part of the eye, that we understand what mechanism that's driving that, doesn't have all the other side effects that smoking cannabis might have. And it's a pharmaceutical drug. That's a defined dose. You have repeatability. So that's what success looks like for us, is advancing that and showing superiority in terms of data. But the superiority comes in two different forms. It could be as a monotherapy, or it could be as a combination, and so far that's what we've been able to demonstrate. So it's too early to say, like what that's going to look like, but the clinical execution now is there, and the roadmap is there for people to see that phase 1 data is safety, tolerability, and we should just, we highlighted this recently. And part of the reason, that was important to highlight is I think everybody's was on their edge of their seat. I was on the edge of my seat in terms of, are we safe in terms of this drug? This is the first time this class is, being used as an eye drop. Not to put aside if it works or not, just want to make sure that nobody's, it's going to be tolerable and safe, and that's been great to be able to highlight from an independent safety review committee that it's safe, tolerable, and we are measuring lowering of IOP in that study, but it's in healthy volunteers. So it's hard to it's going to be hard to tell whether it's drug related or diurnal related, meaning that, people's IOP can fluctuate during the day anyways. So the next phase 2 study is exactly designed to evaluate the efficacy. Of course, all clinical studies are always measuring safety, but the efficacy in actual glaucoma patients and ocular hypertension patients is a critical step. The other thing that is important along the way is the regulatory landscape. Now, one of the advantages I think that's been great in working in ophthalmology is that the FDA hasn't really changed much in leadership in there, and it's been
Interesting.
I think it's been a bonus to really work in this industry, is that you have the speed that's associated with ophthalmology drugs. You know, I've worked in the cancer immunotherapy space. These trials that we've done in the past, they're long trials. Sometimes, you know, you have drugs that you're waiting for survival endpoints. Ophthalmology, you don't have that. You know, we certainly have a, I guess I use the word efficiency, but it's not necessarily the best word, but the timing to get to data, it's generally faster.
So like the
So
cadence is much different, right? When you compare it to
yeah, yeah, the follow, you know, like here, you know, in the current study is just, you know, these are 1 week endpoints. In the phase 2, it's going to be a, you know, 14-day you know, review period and so forth. So it's not like 6 months or 8 months where you're following these patients for that long. So there's going to be, yeah, like you said, the cadence is faster. So the opportunities there from a regulatory standpoint is that the FDA has also had like a bit of consistency with glaucoma drugs. It's been compared against timolol. The last few drugs that have been approved, that's been timolol has been the standard that is the, you know, kind of the gold standard in terms of, can you show equivalence or can you be better to timolol? And that is interesting, because obviously the landscape continues to be fluid there, where there's new drugs available like latanoprost and, you know, Roacutan maybe, or Repressa maybe, in some ways different new standards of care, but timolol has been the gold standard in the eyes of the FDA. So the phase 2 is designed that way, where we're looking at just the placebo control, but we're going to be comparing against published data on timolol. Phase 2B will be a active control with timolol. Most likely, that's what we're thinking right now. So it's rigorously kind of continuing to move that forward, that clinical development, and I've seen now the team accomplish that really well. We had the pre-IND meeting last December of 2021. It was like a 1,000-page submission to the agency. First time the company had any correspondence with the FDA, and then a year later gets it, you know, gets the IND approval, which is great. And part of the reason of that gap is you got to get all the manufacturing and CMC and all of those steps in place. So we've done all that, and the FDA has also been a part of that. I mean, we had the head of the ophthalmology division on the call, and it's nice to, you know, see that the FDA is very interested in this new class of compounds to be advanced. So with that you know, regulatory milestone met, now it's moving that phase 2 program into development. So the US study is important. It's a multi-center study. It's being done with I think some really important KOLs in the space, and that's the other part of what's necessary, is that, okay, as the data comes out, you got to publish, right? So we have to get it in front of the right audiences, and we need to make sure that that those KOLs speak to it, and they're, you know, inspiring the next generation of ophthalmologists to say, okay, I'm going to look at that drug because it has potential for a lowering of IOP, or oh, maybe they are able to show neuroprotection, and all of these types of things that we're, you know, slowly working towards in terms of demonstrating in research. Yeah.
Yes, Punit, I appreciate you highlighting the components for safety, right? I mean, we tend to lose oversight of that, but just understanding the importance of whether there's any safety implications. And then the next sort of a component would be the effectiveness piece. And you touched on the regulatory landscape, so thank you for sharing that as well. Now, just with the interest of time, Punit, I know we've discussed about just the overall background around Skye, what the team is doing, the culture, the phase 1, phase 2 plan initiatives, and the future inflection points discussions. Now, just to keep it open-ended, is there anything else you'd like to just share?
I think I feel like I overshared. No, it's been good. Like it's been you know, I appreciate you taking the time to continue to learn about the company, and that's, like I said, that's the way that we want to continue to operate. is make sure that we give that full understanding of what's fundamentally happening. I'm really, lucky to be working a part of a fabulous team and a board that's committed to making that investment into this into this thing. So there's you can read on. I did a shareholder letter just at the end of November that kind of lays out a good framework in terms of what our overall thinking is, and that's in words. But for me to just say it, I'm really committed towards demonstrating to our stakeholders that we're going to advance this class of compounds, and that is the fine line that we have to do, is about the investment that we make there, as well as demonstrating that return on invested capital on those investments that we're making. So it's going to require us to be bold. We're doing things about advancing this lead compound. The first drug into this class is an eye drop, and at the same time, I don't think many people appreciate, we built out the entire supply chain of being able to do it from research all the way to development under our roof. Like, we have the capability now to do controlled substances every step of the way, except we'll when we do drug scale up, we'll work with the right certified partner. So I'm really proud of being able to have a team and a board and everybody around the company to be really focused on that energy and the experience to do it. I mean, the people that we're working with have developed and launched ophthalmology drugs. They have done it on a large global scale. So it's really rewarding to be able to call up any one of our advisors and in a few seconds get an important critical decision and advance. So we're committed to continue to make those investments. We're a company that's devoted towards executing with integrity as well. I think there's been different things that have come up over the last 12 months because we had an acquisition, and I've looked forward to having those conversations always head on in terms of how we are going to continue to demonstrate as a company we operate with integrity, and we have a great team that's devoted towards making a difference for these patients. I am really excited about some of the future inflection points that are coming up. So it's the clinical data, the ophthalmology pipeline, the growing of the team, growing of the board, and all of these things that are important. So what's exciting me is that now we got the clinical story that's clear. I think hopefully most people have been following along those development milestones. The other part that's exciting me and our R&D team is doing an R&D offsite this week. But it's like what they're spending time on is, okay, what are those in vivo studies that are showing the new indications and the advance of what we're doing in our drug pipeline for things that are outside of glaucoma, or even if it's supportive towards glaucoma, of us on better understanding the mechanism of action. So there's other diseases out there. Glaucoma is naturally like a huge market, number one leading cause of vision loss. Important because that's our clinical focus, but there's other opportunities now that we're starting to spend time on. And then we're also putting the energy in terms of executing through other value add things. So part of this has been the integration side of this acquisition and divesting things that aren't critical for our success in the future, but it's monetizing real estate and those kind of things. But there's also other things that have in our IP portfolio that we're looking to leverage that may be outside of ophthalmology, that we can build value that's non-dilutive, and of course, ultimately strategic partnerships and grants and those kind of things. Company is I think still in a startup phase, but it's a relatively young company that has still a lot to prove out there in terms of execution against using those kind of mechanisms to drive value as well. So looking forward to talking a bit more about those over the course of 2023, and we're going to continue taking the necessary steps to also get that story heard in terms of the broader capital markets. As the company's profile rises, you can talk more sell side and buy side analysts And I think the IR team's been doing a good job of getting us in front of the right conferences and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you, Punit, for highlighting all of that. I just really appreciate the level of detail that you've shared there. So thank you. You know, I appreciate just being able to connect with you, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future so that we can
Yeah.
just learn more about what the company is doing as time progresses. So first off, just wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your day to connect with me. So
Anytime, Daniel. Really appreciate the time. It's a great way to start the Sunday. So let's go make the best of our day.
okay, Puneet,
Take care.
take care.
Bye bye.